Starfield has been through a ton of ups and downs, from being hyped up as a successor to the seemingly immortal Skyrim, to being the ultimate Xbox Series system seller. It's a game that had a lot going for it, but that might have been to its detriment. Starfield is a good game, perhaps more reminiscent of Mass Effect 1 and 2 than Skyrim. Mass Effect was once the gold standard for a space opera shooter hybrid, but the trilogy is now almost 12 years old. Starfield's half-skill-based, half-stats-based shooting, coupled with its galaxy-hopping, fast-travel-dominated quest structure, can feel very Mass Effect, and that's a potential problem for a game longer than the entire trilogy combined. Starfield begins with the usual hero's journey trope. You're a space miner doing a dangerous job for little pay, which was weird given I had built my character as a specialist xenobiologist. Why am I on this resource-rich moon? What went so wrong with my life that I ended up here? You don't have a ton of time to contemplate on that though, as within the first 30 minutes you'll find a mysterious artifact. It gives you some weird vision of floating through the universe. You're gifted a ship and thrust into the wider galaxy to unravel a mystery. Familiar, no? Now maybe I'm being unfair as many games start this way, but it's a curious jumping off point given the obvious comparisons. Thankfully, the game quickly sheds its Mass Effect-ish themes, as while you're tasked with unraveling this mystery, you really don't have to. I mainlined the Constellation questline for about 20 hours, and then said, sod it, I'm not exploring another temple, let me just do whatever the game will allow. And there really has to be something said about the freedom of just grav jumping around a galaxy, exploring, shooting, stealing, negotiating, and just living out your fantasy life, as there's no shortage of interesting faction quest lines and infinite procedural activities. It suddenly became a relaxing diversion, and, well, more of a life sim than a sci-fi shooter. I could finally understand this is how those lifers in Skyrim feel, sinking thousands of hours into a game over the last decade. Having said that, the galaxy is perhaps a bit too true to life. NASA research suggests the universe is pretty much a barren and lifeless wasteland, so exploring the several hundred planets and moons Starfield has on offer can be very, very tedious. I explored about 10 planets and moon landing zones thoroughly before I realized just how repetitive and unrewarding it was. Grateful screenshots though. As a point of comparison, No Man's Sky was also accused of bait-and-switch marketing with its procedurally generated worlds that looked nothing like the end result. But Starfield, a game with a massively higher budget, demonstrates just how tough it is to create enough assets and a complex algorithm to create a galaxy that's actually full of interesting things to see and do. Now, at least the main quest, faction quests, and many secondary quests are good when they're good, but they can feel fairly mundane when you're tackling the 50th one. Many of the factions feel complex, and the frequent moral ambiguity in some quests reminded me of the best of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, where all you could do was roleplay and hope that your decisions wouldn't come back to haunt you. Sadly, it didn't take long to realize many of these quests also use procedurally generated locations, and you'll soon recognize the layout of facilities and even the objective location. When you're building a sprawling world, some repetition is to be expected, but the boring landscapes all blur together, and I was shocked at the limited number of location types, especially when successive quests could send me back into identical facilities. I guess to their credit, many locations at least feel well designed and give you the opportunity to sneak around, pick digilocks, target hazards in the environment, or hack robots to thin out the enemies. Several major quest encounters can also be resolved through dialogue confrontations, but honestly I didn't spend too much time with this as it wasn't much fun. It might remind you a little bit of Cyberpunk 2077, but it's nowhere near as refined, and actually feels like a step back from the skill and trait-based dialogue of the prior games. Talking of taking a step back, the same can be said for how unexciting exploration is. Presumably to reduce boredom or tedium, fast travel on the surface of a planet, and even between systems, can simply be done via menus. Open the map, select a marker, and wait for the cutscene to finish. Unexpectedly, combat is where Starfield shines. Gone are the attribute-heavy mechanics and clumsy aiming of Fallout 3 and 4 that all but forced you to use VATs. It feels like Bethesda tapped into id Software or Machine Games' expertise and had them design or advise the gunplay. Cover-based fighting, automatic leaning, and hit markers all complement the obligatory numbers game that any RPG FPS hybrid demands. What's even better is the simple space combat. Piloting your ship is a breeze, but similar to X-Wing vs TIE Fighter, you have to divert power between weapons, shields, and engine to maximize your chances of coming out of a fight intact. Of course, combat means XP gain, gear drops, and crafting resources. Starfield has plenty of gameplay systems to explore. Each level unlocks points you can invest in a sprawling skill tree. Credits and loot are plentiful enough that you can frequently purchase new weapons, mods for gears, or upgrades for your ship system, and eventually you can build a ship from scratch. If you have the patience, you can even set up outposts that mine, refine, and transport crafting resources. I found the shipbuilder system was a particular highlight and a creator's dream, well, once you have the right skills and enough resources. Starfield can be an attractive looking game, with some beautiful vistas backed up by an incredible soundtrack. Performance, however, was another reminder that this is a Bethesda game. Before the day one patch, my Steam review version kept crashing during the tutorial, and I mined that damnable artifact more times than I cared to count. After a week and a half of patches though, the game finally ran well on my high-end rig, and since then I've never seen the frame rate drop below 120 frames per second, even though the game doesn't yet support all the DLSS 3 features of my GTX 4090. So overall, Starfield is a good game, but the desire for another Skyrim, the expectations from the Microsoft buyout, and the desperate hope for an Xbox system seller has made it all but impossible to live up to the hype. If you mainline the story to experience the New Game Plus variations, or just go for a freeform Zen playthrough as an explorer, you're guaranteed hours and hours of somewhat repetitive fun. If you were hoping for something that'll finally satisfy the console fanboys, you might need to wait and see how the next Microsoft exclusive pans out. If you've got this far, please consider giving the video a like and maybe subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow.